Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you something today that may sound simple, but it's powerful enough to change your entire life. Let God plan your life. You see, we all have dreams. We all have ideas about how things should go. We have blueprints, calendars, and expectations. But sometimes, just sometimes, life doesn't go according to plan. And that's not always a bad thing. There were times in my life when I begged for things to happen. I prayed for certain doors to open, but instead they slammed shut. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought of God, why not me? Why not now? But now I look back and realize, thank God it didn't go my way. Because if it had, I would have missed out on the life He had planned for me. You see, when we let God take the pen and write our story, it won't always make sense at first. It won't always feel comfortable. But it will be full of purpose. It will be full of growth. And most importantly, it will be full of peace. Maybe you're in a season where things feel uncertain. Maybe you feel like you're not enough. You're waiting for answers, direction, purpose. But what if the waiting is part of the plan? What if the delay is actually preparation? What if what feels like rejection is really redirection? I've learned that surrender isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's saying, God, I don't know what's ahead, but I trust that you do. And that's enough for me. You may have scars. You may have pain. But God doesn't waste anything. He can use your broken pieces to build something more beautiful than you imagined. So stop trying to control every detail. Stop fearing the unknown. Instead, choose faith. Choose trust. Let go of your timeline and embrace His. Let God plan your life and watch Him do something extraordinary with it. There are moments in life when it feels like everything is falling apart. The job you wanted doesn't come through. The relationship you invested in ends without warning. The opportunities you worked so hard for vanish into thin air. And in those moments, it's easy to feel defeated. It's easy to question your worth, your decisions, your path. But what if those setbacks aren't the end? What if they're actually the beginning of something far more beautiful than you imagined? When a door closes, it hurts. No one enjoys being told no. But sometimes that no is the greatest blessing you never asked for. Because a setback, as painful as it might be, can be a setup for something greater. Life doesn't always give us what we want, but sometimes it gives us exactly what we need. You see, when you trust God with your life, you begin to understand that there's a purpose behind every pause, every detour, and every heartbreak. The job that didn't work out, maybe it was going to lead you down a road that would have drained your soul. That person who walked away, maybe they weren't meant to walk with you into your next chapter. The dream that didn't happen, maybe God was protecting you from settling for less than what He had in store for you. It's easy to have faith when things are going well. But real faith is built in the dark, in the struggle, in the silence when prayers feel unanswered and the future feels uncertain. And it's in those moments that God is often doing His deepest work, not around you, but within you. He's building your character, refining your purpose, stretching your capacity. You may not see it right away, but every painful moment can become the foundation for something extraordinary. Think about a seed planted in the ground. It disappears from view. It's buried, hidden, seemingly forgotten. But underground, something powerful is happening. Roots are forming, strength is growing, and in time it breaks through the soil not as a seed, but as a strong growing plant. Your setbacks are like that soil. They may feel like endings, but they're actually the environment for growth. Sometimes we want things too soon. We want the spotlight before we've learned how to stand steady. We want the blessing without the burden that shapes our strength. But God loves us too much to give us things we're not ready for. So, instead of rushing, He prepares us. And sometimes that preparation looks like pain. But if you hang on, if you trust Him through it, you'll find that the very thing that looked like it would break you becomes the thing that builds you. We live in a world that celebrates fast success, overnight victories, highlight reels. But real life doesn't always work that way. Real growth takes time. Real strength comes from resistance, and real purpose often rises from pain. The rejection you experience may be exactly what pushed you into the arms of your true calling. The disappointment may have slowed you down just long enough to notice a new path you wouldn't have seen otherwise. There's a story being written that's bigger than you can see right now. The pieces might not make sense on their own, but in time, you'll see how they fit together. You'll see how the job that fell through made room for the one that fulfills you. How the heartbreak pushed you closer to healing. How the loneliness drew you into deeper connection with God. It's not easy. There are going to be days when you want to give up, when the silence is loud and the pain feels too much. But those are the very days where your faith is being forged. You may not be where you want to be yet, but you're on the way. And what feels like a detour is often God's route to destiny. So don't let the setback define you. Let it refine you. Let it teach you. Let it push you closer to the one who knows the full picture. Because when you give your life to God and trust His plan, you'll find that nothing is wasted. Not the tears, not the waiting, not even the failure. All of it can be used. All of it can become part of your testimony. What you think is the end might just be the turning point. The failure you fear might be the first step to something far greater than success. Let God use your setbacks to set you up for growth, for strength, for purpose. You may not understand it now, but one day you'll look back and say, thank God it didn't go my way. Because His way, it's always better. Even when it starts with a setback, we grow up learning to take control. From an early age, we're taught to make plans, set goals, and chase success with determination. And while there's nothing wrong with ambition, there's a line we often cross where our desire for control begins to choke our peace. We feel the pressure to make everything happen, to fix every problem, to know every step ahead. But life has a way of reminding us that no matter how tightly we grip the wheel, we're not in full control. And that's where surrender comes in. Not as a sign of weakness, but as an act of trust in something greater. Surrendering your control doesn't mean giving up on life. It means recognizing that your strength has limits, but God's strength doesn't. It's not about being passive or lazy. It's about saying, God, I've done my part, now I trust you to do what only you can. That kind of trust takes courage, because it's hard to let go. It's hard to stop fighting battles that we've never been asked to fight. But when you do, there's a deep peace that replaces the anxiety. You stop carrying the weight of outcomes you were never meant to hold. There's a reason why we feel exhausted when we try to control everything, because it's impossible. Life is unpredictable. People change. Plans fail. Circumstances shift, and trying to manage every detail only wears us down. But when we surrender to God, we shift the burden off our shoulders and place it into the hands of the one who sees the beginning and the end. That doesn't make us weak, it makes us wise. Control is often rooted in fear. We're afraid of what might happen if things don't go our way. We're scared of pain, of disappointment, of failure. So we tighten our grip, we micromanage, we overthink. We lose sleep trying to hold everything together. But surrender is the opposite of fear. It's faith in action. It's saying I don't have to understand everything to trust that God is still working. There's power in saying, I don't know, but I know who does. There's strength in releasing the need to be the one with all the answers. Some of the most peaceful people in the world aren't the ones with perfect lives. They're the ones who've learned to release control and rest in God's plan. They've discovered that surrender brings clarity, and that letting go opens the door to blessings they couldn't have created on their own. Let's be honest, there are times when we think we know what's best. We chase relationships, careers, and opportunities that look good on the surface. But sometimes the very thing we're fighting to keep is the thing God is asking us to release. Not because He wants to punish us, but because He wants to protect us. Because He sees what we can't. And in those moments, surrender feels like loss, but it's actually a win in disguise. It's trading short-term control for long-term peace. You might be facing something right now that feels out of control. Maybe it's a health issue. Maybe it's a broken relationship. Maybe you've done everything right, and still it's not working, and it's frustrating. You wonder, why would God let this happen? But sometimes it's in those very moments that He's calling you to surrender. Not because He's distant, but because He's near. Not because He's abandoning you, but because He wants to walk with you through it, not around. You don't have to have it all figured out. That's not your job. Your job is to trust. Your job is to be faithful with what you've been given and trust God with what you haven't. Your job is to pray, to act with integrity, and to rest in the knowledge that you're not walking alone. When you surrender control, you start to live with open hands instead of clenched fists. You stop striving and start abiding. You stop panicking and start trusting. And in that place, miracles can happen. Doors open that you didn't knock on. Strength rises that you didn't know you had. Joy returns, not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer trying to be your own savior. God never asks you to carry the whole weight of your life alone. That's why surrender isn't weakness. It's trust, it's maturity, it's freedom. And yes, it's scary at first. But once you taste the peace that comes with letting go, you'll never want to go back to living with clenched fists. So if you're tired of forcing things, of trying to fix what's beyond you, maybe it's time to surrender. Not as a last resort, but as a first step toward real freedom. Because the moment you release control is the moment you make space for God to move. And He can do far more with your surrender than you can do with your control. It could feel like the hardest thing in the world. You pray, you plan, you do everything you can, and still nothing seems to move. You see others getting what you've been hoping for. You see people moving ahead where you feel stuck in place. And in those moments, it's easy to wonder if God has forgotten you. It's easy to question your worth, your prayers, your future. But what if the waiting isn't a punishment? What if the delay is actually preparation? God doesn't operate on our schedules. He doesn't rush just because we feel ready. He sees beyond the moment. He sees the bigger picture. And sometimes what feels like a delay is actually Him working behind the scenes, setting things in motion, aligning people, protecting you from a blessing that's too big for you to carry right now. It's not that He doesn't want to give you good things. It's that He loves you too much to give them too soon. We live in a culture that celebrates speed, fast results, instant gratification, quick fix. But the best things in life are often the ones that take time. Think about it. Trees don't grow overnight. Diamonds aren't formed in an instant. Strength isn't built in a day. And the same goes for your purpose. It's not something that drops into your lap fully formed. It's shaped in the waiting, in the refining, in the seasons where nothing seems to be happening on the surface. But everything is changing underneath. Waiting stretches your faith. It reveals what you really believe. When the answers don't come quickly, when the path isn't clear, you learn to lean not on your own understanding, but on the promises God made, even if you don't see them yet. And that kind of faith, that's where the foundation of your future is built. Sometimes God delays what you're asking for because He's more focused on who you're becoming than where you're going. The job, the relationship, the breakthrough, those things are important, but your character is even more important. You might be asking for something big, but if your heart isn't ready to carry it, that same blessing could crush you. So instead of giving you what you want right now, God works on you. He teaches you patience. He teaches you trust. He teaches you how to depend on Him. Not just when things go right, but when nothing makes sense. There's something sacred about the waiting. It strips away your pride. It humbles you. It quiets the noise. And in that quiet place, you hear God more clearly. You discover strength you didn't know you had. You find peace, not because your circumstances changed, but because your heart did. You start to realize that waiting is not wasted time. It's where God does some of His best work. Look back on your life. There were times you thought the delay would break you. You thought the silence meant abandonment. But looking back, can you see how that season shaped you? Can you see how it prepared you for what came next? That's not coincidence. That's purpose. That's a loving God saying, I'm not done with you. I'm just preparing something greater. It's in the waiting that you develop endurance. It's in the waiting that your faith gets real. And it's in the waiting that God often births a new vision, a deeper calling, a stronger identity. You begin to realize that your value isn't in how fast you get somewhere, but in who you're becoming along the way. Sometimes we rush to open doors God never asked us to walk through. We try to force relationships, force decisions, force outcomes. But when we wait on Him, we learn to move with wisdom instead of impulse. We stop trying to make things happen in our own strength and start trusting the one who holds time in his hands. It's not easy. Waiting tests your patience. It tests your attitude. It tests your hope. But it also grows you. It anchors you. It prepares you for what's next. And when the time is right, when your heart is ready and the pieces are lying, God opens doors no man can shut. He brings clarity where there was confusion. He breathes life into places that once felt dead. So if you're in a season of delay, don't give up. Don't assume the silence means God isn't listening. Sometimes the delay is God's way of saying, I'm still writing your story. Just trust me with the next chapter. Because when it finally unfolds, you'll understand why it took time. You'll see the beauty in the preparation. And you'll realize that the wait wasn't about punishment. It was about protection. It was about growth. And it was always about love. There's a voice inside so many people that whispers, or not enough. It shows up when you're trying something new, when you're stepping out in faith, when you're about to do something that feels bigger than you. It creeps in with doubts, with insecurities, with comparison. And before you know it, you start believing the lie that you have to be perfect, that you have to have it all together, that you have to be qualified before you can be used by God. But here's the truth. God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. You don't have to be the smartest, the strongest, or the most talented for God to use you. You just have to be willing. He's not looking for perfection. He's looking for obedience. He's not searching for flawless people. He's looking for hearts that say, here I am, Lord, use me. Because when you bring your little, God can turn it into much. Throughout history, God has used people who, on paper, didn't make sense. Moses had a speech problem. David was just a shepherd boy. Esther was an orphan. Peter denied Jesus. Paul persecuted Christians. And yet these are the very people God used to change the world. Why? Because they said yes. Because they trusted that God could do more through them than they could ever do on their own. Feeling unqualified doesn't disqualify you. In fact, it might be the very thing that makes you ready. When you know you don't have all the answers, you stay dependent on the one who does. When you're aware of your weakness, you lean into God's strength. And that's where power is born, not in your perfection, but in your surrender. We often wait until we feel ready. But if you wait until you're 100% confident, you'll never take the first step. Growth comes after you say yes, not before. The process is messy. It's full of mistakes and learning curves, but God is not intimidated by your mess. He's not surprised by your fear. He's not discouraged by your past. He sees who you truly are, and even more, he sees who you're becoming. When you look at yourself through the lens of your insecurities, it's easy to feel like you don't measure up. But when God looks at you, he sees potential, purpose, and promise. He sees someone worth choosing. Not because you've earned it, but because he loves you. Sometimes we disqualify ourselves before we even begin. We think, I'm too broken. I've made too many mistakes. I'm not spiritual enough. I don't know enough. But God's not waiting for you to be perfect. He's waiting for you to be available. It's showing up even when you don't feel qualified and trusting that he will fill in the gaps. God doesn't need your perfection. He wants your partnership. He wants to take your willingness and multiply it. He wants to take your weakness and show his strength. He wants to use your story, not just for you, but to impact the lives around you. Because the truth is, the world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more real people who are willing to say, I don't have it all together, but I'm showing up anyway. So if you're feeling unqualified, you're in good company. You're right where God does some of his best work, and the moment you say yes, just as you are free is the moment he begins to do more through you than you ever imagined. There's a deep desire inside every human heart to be seen, to be known, and to be loved. We look for it in people, in places, in accomplishments. We crave approval, attention, affirmation, anything that tells us we matter. But the problem is, when we build our identity on things that can change, we end up chasing worth that never lasts. People's opinions shift. Circumstances change. Achievements fade. And when those things become the foundation of who you are, your identity becomes fragile. But when you find your identity in God, something powerful happens. You begin to live from a place of confidence, not insecurity. You stop chasing validation and start walking in purpose. You stop asking, am I enough? And start believing, I'm already loved. That's not arrogance, that's truth. Because your worth was never meant to be based on what you do. It's based on what He's already done. The world will always try to label you. It'll define you by your past, your failures, your mistakes. It will measure you by your success, your image, your performance. But God doesn't call you by your shame. He calls you by your name. He says you are chosen. You are loved. You are His. And that identity is unshakable. When you root your identity in God, you begin to see yourself differently. You stop letting rejection speak louder than truth. You stop letting fear control your future. You begin to believe that you are not what happened to you. You are not what you lost. You are not your shortcomings. You are not your success. You are a child of God, created on purpose, for a purpose. That kind of identity doesn't shift with seasons. It stands firm in the storm. When life doesn't go as planned, when people walk away, when the road gets tough, you don't crumble because your identity isn't built on sand. It's anchored in something eternal. It's easy to forget this when life gets loud, when comparison creeps in, when social media tells you who you should be, how you should look, what you should achieve. But you don't have to live for likes to feel loved. You don't have to pretend to be perfect to be accepted. You've already been chosen by the one who sees everything and still says, you're mine. Finding your identity in God also means you stop trying to prove yourself all the time. You no longer hustle for worth. You no longer base your peace on performance. You serve, you love, you lead, not to be seen, but because you know who you are. And from that place, you live with a quiet strength, a humble confidence that says, I don't need to impress people when I know I'm already approved by God. There's a freedom in that, a freedom to be real, to be honest, to be fully you, without shame, without masks, without fear, because when your identity is secure, you no longer live to gain acceptance, you live from acceptance, and that changes everything. Doesn't mean life will be perfect. You'll still face challenges, you'll still wrestle with doubt, but you'll fight those battles differently, because you're no longer fighting for identity, you're fighting from identity. You walk into rooms with purpose, you face setbacks with resilience. You rise after failure because you know failure isn't final. The truth is, when you don't know who you are, you'll settle for anything. You'll settle for toxic relationships, shallow success, temporary highs. You'll look for worth in all the wrong places. But when you know who you are in God, you stop settling. You start living intentionally. You make decisions from a place of clarity. You know what matters and what doesn't. You know what to walk toward and what to walk away from. And that doesn't just change your life, it impacts the lives around you. Because when you live out of a strong identity, you love others better. You're not competing or comparing. You're not driven by insecurity or fear. You become someone who builds others up, who speaks life, who carries light into dark places. You become someone who knows your value. And because of that, you see the value in others. You stop judging by the surface and start looking at the heart. You become a reflection of grace, of love, of truth. And that reflection points people not just to who you are, but to who God is. So many people walk through life never knowing who they really are. They wear masks. They follow trends. They shape themselves to fit the mold. But when you root yourself in God, you find something deeper. You find identity that doesn't fade. You find worth that doesn't waver. You find peace that doesn't depend on performance. And once you've found that, nothing else compares. You realize you don't have to become someone else to be valuable. You just have to become who you were always created to be. Not defined by the world, but defined by the one who made you. That's where true identity is found. That's where real life begins. We all come to a point in life where we realize our plans, our strength, and our understanding have limits. We try to hold everything together, push forward, chase dreams, and fix what's broken. And sometimes it works for a while, but sooner or later, life hands us something bigger than us. A disappointment we didn't see coming, a delay that feels never ending, a decision that shakes our confidence. And in those moments, we have two choices. Keep trying to do life our way, or finally let go and say, God, I trust you? Letting God plan your life isn't a one-time event. It's a daily surrender. It's waking up each morning and choosing to believe that His ways are higher than ours. That His timing, though frustrating at times, is perfect. That His plan isn't always predictable, but it is always purposeful. And that surrender, that's where real peace lives. Not in controlling the future, but in trusting the one who already holds it. There's something powerful about admitting, I don't know what's next, but I know I'm not alone. We spend so much of our lives trying to avoid uncertainty, trying to make sure everything adds up, trying to write the perfect story. But the best stories, the ones that shape us, stretch us, and surprise us, are usually the ones we didn't write ourselves. They're the ones where God steps in and does something greater than we ever imagined. When you let God lead, things change. Not always around you, but inside you. You stop measuring your value by what you achieve. You stop letting fear call the shots. You stop waiting to feel qualified or perfect before you move. Instead, you walk in faith, even if it's with shaky steps. You begin to see life not as something to survive, but as something to trust through. The truth is, God's plan isn't always the easiest road, but it's always the right one. It may take you through valleys you didn't expect. It may ask you to wait longer than you wanted. It may stretch you in ways you never thought you could handle. But it will also lead you to places you never could have reached on your own. To joy that doesn't depend on your circumstances. To purpose that isn't limited by your past. To peace that stands even when the storm doesn't stop. We've talked about surrendering control, about trusting during the wait, about believing that even in your weakness, you're not disqualified. And we've talked about identity, the kind that doesn't shift with success or failure, the kind that's rooted in something eternal.